Maybe I should get started. It looks like we lost a few people at the party last night, or people are fed up hearing about GLP-1, I don't know. I want to start by thanking Mark for inviting me back to the conference again this year. Last year I gave a very similar talk about the current status of the GLP-1 market, and Mark asked me to give an update on what's happened over the past 12 months, and also give some sort of outlook on how things are shaping up a few years from now. It's probably a fool's errand to try and predict what will happen 3 or 4 years from now in this market, but I'll give it my best shot. So a year ago at this conference, it didn't take a genius to say that at the time Novo Nordisk was the king of the GLP-1 market. In fact, their stock price was at all-time highs. This company was single-handedly propping up the GDP of Denmark. And I think there was just extreme optimism about this company. 1 year later, and things are looking pretty different. Novo Nordisk stock is down 60, 70% since then in only 12 months. And just a couple of days ago, the government of Denmark said they were slashing the GDP forecast because Novo Nordisk were selling less drug than they had previously forecast. So this is a huge impact just from one company on the country of Denmark. A year ago, it was also pretty obvious to say that although Novo Nordisk was on top of the obesity market, Eli Lilly was quickly catching up with them, both in terms of market share and in terms of the way they were quickly expanding their pipeline for the future obesity market. And in fact, Lilly are still doing pretty well. They're the most valuable pharmaceutical company in the world. And compared to Novo Nordisk, there's, I think, a very high degree of optimism around this company. And we can see why this is. It's pretty clear. This chart shows the obesity market in the US. The gray line at the top shows the overall size of the market. So we can see that more and more people are taking GLP-1s. Still, the market is growing pretty consistently. But we also see that Novo Nordisk has lost a lot of market share to Eli Lilly over the past 14 months or so. In the summer of last year, there was a very clear change in preference for patients or doctors to take tirzepatide from Eli Lilly rather than semaglutide from Novo Nordisk. And the reason for that is also very obvious. You just need to look at two numbers. For those who don't know, Novo Nordisk's drug is semaglutide, which is also known as Ozempic or Wegovy. And Lilly have tirzepatide, which is also known as Zepbound or Mounjaro. I think nowadays, at least in the US and Europe, these are pretty well-known brand names. And the key numbers here are the weight loss placebo-adjusted at 52 weeks. For semaglutide, the average patient is seeing about 13% weight loss, whereas on tirzepatide, the average patient is seeing about 19% weight loss. Those two numbers are by far the most important thing, but typically patients are seeing less side effects on tirzepatide. And another thing that's important to note is typically on tirzepatide, people are losing more fat and less muscle compared to semaglutide. So I think all around, tirzepatide is a much better drug for patients than semaglutide, and this explains the majority of the shift in market dominance over the past 12 months. So that's what's happened so far. Now I want to look towards the future, sticking with Lilly and Novo. I think going forward, any drug that comes to market has to be better than tirzepatide. Tirzepatide is now the baseline to beat with 19% weight loss. At Lilly, they have a next-generation drug called retatrutide. This is a triple agonist for GLP-1, whereas tirzepatide is a double agonist. This is seeing 22% weight loss at 52 weeks. I think this is not groundbreaking. It's incrementally better. But the important thing is it will give Eli Lilly a chance to market two drugs at two different price points to two different types of people. Tirzepatide can be a cheaper product for people who don't need weight loss so quickly, and maybe retatrutide is a more expensive premium luxury product, whatever you want to call it, for patients who want to lose weight as fast as possible. It'll be interesting to see how Lilly co-market these drugs. Probably retatrutide comes to market about 18 months from now. But I think at this point, Lilly does not need to have a groundbreaking next-generation drug. They just need something a little bit better. Over at Novo Nordisk, they had very high hopes for their next-generation drug called CagriSema. CagriSema is basically a one-to-one mixture of cagrilintide and semaglutide. Cagrilintide is another peptide drug. I think this is not competitive at all, in my humble opinion. The weight loss is only at 17%, which is not even competitive with the baseline, which is now 19% with tirzepatide. The side effects are also higher. And I think from a manufacturing cost of goods point of view, manufacturing 2 peptides is just not better than manufacturing 1. So I think in every way, CagriSema is not impressive or competitive. Luckily for Novo, they have a couple more drugs in the pipeline, albeit quite further behind. These are amycretin and UBT251. In terms of weight loss, both of these drugs look very promising. Amycretin has shown 20% weight loss over 36 weeks, and UBT is showing 15% weight loss over 12 weeks, which is exceptionally impressive. I would take these drugs with a pinch of salt, these data with a pinch of salt. The data is still pretty early, and I think if there's one thing to be learned from the past 18 months in the obesity field is that many companies with their molecules going from phase 1 to phase 2, or from phase 2 to phase 3, they're seeing data get worse as the sample size gets bigger. This has happened consistently over many different types of obesity drugs. So while amycretin and UBT look pretty good right now, the data could change in the future. And I think the most negative thing here for Novo Nordisk is that amycretin and UBT are at least a few years away from coming to market, probably 4 years even. Whereas tirzepatide is already taking market share from them, and retatrutide is probably only 18 months away from coming to market. So I think that's the biggest problem here for Novo. These 3 drugs I've shown here from Novo are pretty much all they have in the pipeline that could come to market this decade, whereas Lilly are in a much better situation. Basically, Lilly are putting their money everywhere. 18 months ago, 2 years ago, the word GLP-1 was synonymous with obesity. And still, the entire obesity market for the drugs that are available on the market are GLP-1s. But the obesity market is starting to fragment into several different subclasses of drugs. Nowadays, not everything that's coming through the pipeline is a GLP-1. We're also seeing muscle-preserving drugs, we're seeing amylin agonists, we're seeing small molecules. And Lilly are putting their money everywhere. I just want to highlight 3 of them here, but it's important to note that Lilly have many more drugs aside from these 3 in early phase clinical trials or preclinical studies. The first one is orforglipron. I think everyone's familiar with this by now. This is their oral small molecule GLP-1 drug. The weight loss is not that impressive. It's actually less than semaglutide. But the point is that they're going for a so far untapped market, which is people who do not want to inject themselves every week with a peptide. I think a couple years ago, people thought that this market would be bigger than they think now. I think it's a pretty small proportion of people who don't want to inject themselves. But if you are that person and you're willing to wait for a little bit longer time to achieve the weight loss, then this is a pretty good drug. It's a daily pill. It's pretty well tolerated. I think it's a good option for some people. The second one is bimagrumab. This is an antibody for muscle preservation. The data I've shown here is from a trial where they dosed it intravenously, but they are now studying a subcutaneous version of this, which will make it much more competitive. So when this drug was given on its own, bimagrumab, over 48 weeks, placebo-adjusted weight loss is 8%. Compare that head-to-head with semaglutide with 13%. But when they dose bimagrumab and semaglutide together, patients are seeing 18% weight loss over 48 weeks. So there's a clear additive effect here. They're now also studying, of course, bimagrumab in combination with tirzepatide. And I think that could show even greater weight loss. And if that can be achieved as a subcutaneous dose, then this combination drug could be the best in class in the future. The most important thing here is the lean mass loss with bimagrumab semaglutide combination is only 3%. So 97% of the weight loss is fat. Whereas patients who only take semaglutide are losing 40% muscle, 60% fat. So actually pretty bad. This is the key differentiating factor here with bimagrumab. I think this is very impressive. It's a potential future best in class. The final one I want to highlight is eloralintide. This is another sub-Q peptide given weekly. It's not a GLP-1, it's an amylin agonist instead. It's showing 11% weight loss over 12 weeks. This is very impressive. Again, this data is very early stage, so take it with a pinch of salt. But so far it looks pretty well tolerated and pretty competitive as an alternative to a GLP-1. They have many more drugs in the pipeline, but these 3 combined with tirzepatide and retatrutide, I think, put Eli Lilly in a very, very strong position. Oh yeah, I think my graphics are a bit messed up here. But this is, in case anyone thinks I'm being paid by Lilly to say such wonderful things about them, here is something slightly negative, slightly interesting. It's kind of also funny as well. Here are three structures of tirzepatide at the top. The second one is Viking's 2735, and the third one is Brightgene's 0504. The difference between these three molecules is almost nothing. Going from tirzepatide from Lilly to Viking's drug, the only change they made is changing the carboxylic acid to a phosphoric acid. The key peptide backbone has not changed at all. Similarly, Brightgene's molecule, they've just made some changes to the side chain, and they've moved the side chain from the middle of the molecule to the terminus. The key thing here is that the peptide backbone, the part of the molecule that's really doing the work, the part of the molecule that you would argue is the inventive step, the key discovery, somehow has not been protected by Lilly's army of patent lawyers. I have a lot of respect for Viking and Brightgene for coming along and scooping up a very promising molecule pretty easily just by finding a hole in their patent protection. But this is pretty surprising, especially from a company like Lilly. I think just worth noting, but I think Lilly shouldn't be too worried about it. The answer to the question, who else is in the obesity pipeline, is literally everyone. Any large cap, medium cap pharma company you can name, they have some exposure to the obesity market. Not necessarily GLP-1, but they have some exposure some other way. There's also dozens of other startup companies, small biotech companies also getting into this field. This image is from a Stifel healthcare presentation. They're an investment bank in healthcare. You can find it online. This slide shows some of them. This slide shows even more of them. Aside from what's shown here, there are dozens more companies getting into this area. The point is that it's becoming very, very saturated. And I think there's something like more than 150, maybe getting close to 200 drugs being studied for obesity right now. I think it's pretty obvious that the vast majority of these drugs cannot come to market. There simply can't be that many drugs for the same indication on the market at the same time. I want to highlight a few key competitors, or at least ones that I'm picking out. It's impossible for me to talk about all of them, and it's very difficult. It's becoming more difficult to compare apples to apples, all of the drugs that are being studied right now for obesity. So I've picked out 4 companies, 5 drugs that I think are potential key competitors for retatrutide, which is probably going to be the next best drug to come to market. I've picked these for 2 reasons. The first reason is that obviously they have very powerful drugs that are very effective. The second reason is that they're well-funded companies who are being run by people who I think can bring drugs to market in a very competitive environment. I think the same thing cannot be said for many of the people getting into obesity now. Funding is starting to dry up for a lot of the smaller companies that are trying to get in here. These 4 companies stand a good chance. The first 3 from Kylera, Viking, and Roche, these are all potential retatrutide competitors. These 3 companies are going for sheer weight loss. They're just trying to lose as much weight as possible, as quickly as possible. Kylera is seeing about 21% weight loss over 36 weeks. Viking, which is the molecule I showed before, very similar to tirzepatide, they're seeing 13% over only 12 weeks. I think the 36-week or 52-week data from Viking could be extremely competitive. Similarly with Roche and their CT388 molecule, very good weight loss. I also wanted to highlight this molecule from Roche because they're seeing very high rates of vomiting and nausea in their trials, up to 75% vomiting. That sounds terrible, but it's actually pretty common in the obesity field. We're seeing this with many obesity drugs, particularly the peptide drugs, particularly in phase 1, early phase 2 studies. It's not too concerning. Many companies are just having to change the dosing regime, maybe slow down the titration of the dose in phase 2B or phase 3 studies. It's something they can deal with. The 4th company is Metsera. I like this company a lot. They're trying to differentiate themselves by going for a monthly dosed peptide. I'm not sure that many people care that much about dosing monthly versus weekly, but this company is trying to do something to set themselves apart from Lilly, instead of just going for maximum weight loss as fast as possible. They're also very well funded. I think they recently received $400 million or something like that. So they have what they need to come to market if these drugs look good in further studies. Particularly their molecule, their amylin agonist 233I is showing 8% weight loss over only 5 weeks. I think that's maybe the fastest weight loss we've ever seen. It's probably approaching the point of maximum safe weight loss in humans. For a 240-pound person, that's like 120 kilos, that's equivalent to more than half a pound of weight loss every day. I think it's really reaching an extreme point. The data I've shown here from Metsera is not dosed monthly, this is weekly dosed, but they are currently studying the monthly dosing, and they have a lot of PK data and animal data to back up the monthly hypothesis. So I think these four could take on Novo and Lilly. There are dozens of other companies that I think will struggle. Certainly some will do well, but it's just becoming a very saturated market. This is one complete wild card company I wanted to highlight. I think very few people are aware of this company. This is something completely different. They are really trying to set themselves apart from the current pack. So Lumen Bioscience, they are based in Seattle, I think. Basically, they have the only intellectual property in the world for genetically bioengineering a cyanobacteria, which is just an algae. This is called spirulina. Spirulina is already an approved food substance in the US. People take this as a protein powder or for some other health benefits. I'm not sure exactly what. But you can go on Amazon and buy the non-genetically engineered spirulina as a green powder. They are genetically engineering this to produce an anti-obesity protein in the cell. They have not yet announced what that protein or peptide is. But in animals, the weight loss data looks exceptionally good. We don't have any human data yet. I think that's ongoing right now. But key things that could set this drug apart if the weight loss in humans is good are oral dosing, as well as it already being an approved food substance. It might have an easier regulatory pathway to getting approved. I'm not sure. It could even become an OTC drug if it works well. The animal data is excellent, and I think the key thing here is the manufacturing process is absolutely perfect. I think it doesn't get better than this. Basically, to manufacture this, you take a small amount of the previous batch, you put it in water with some nutrients, you give it light, you give it CO2 gas, and 4 or 5 days later, the algae has bloomed. You filter the algae, you wash it with water, you dry it, and that's it. You don't have to extract the anti-obesity protein from the cell, you don't have to lyophilize it, you don't have to do HPLC. There's no chemical reagents, there's no organic solvent, there's nothing. I think for any chemical or biological drug, it doesn't get better than this. This will be extremely cheap. This reminds me of the unbelievably large amino acid factories in China, where they ferment amino acids on a huge scale, and at the end of it, they get a pure amino acid that's like 20 cents a kilo or something. It costs almost nothing because it's so cheap to do. This is a similar process. So I say this is a real wild card because if the data in humans is, let's say, matching semaglutide weight loss levels, not even matching tirzepatide, if they can just achieve semaglutide levels, then I think they have a real competitor to shake up the whole obesity industry. And actually, not just the obesity industry. This could shake up the whole peptide CDMO world. Right now, peptide CDMOs like Sinopep are relying on the GLP-1 peptide explosion. We're all making huge investments and we're relying on that continuing for a long time. If something like this comes along and it's really excellent in humans, that would really be bad for us. And I think when the phase 1 data comes out, a lot of companies should be paying very close attention to this. So that's my wild card. Let's see. I think this is either boom or bust. Let's see what happens. Going back to Lilly versus Novo, I already said I think Lilly should remain on top. The obesity market is really fragmenting into multiple different subclasses of drugs. The key 5 that I put up here are double incretins, triple incretins, oral drugs, muscle preservants, and amylin agonists. I'm not saying Lilly will have the best drug in all 5 of these subclasses, but they will have a very good drug. And more importantly, they will be there before anyone else. Aside from the 5 divisions I put up here, Lilly are placing huge bets in many other areas of the obesity field that are starting to come up. They're also spending insane amounts of money putting huge numbers of people through clinical trials. I haven't been in the pharma industry that long, but I think this might be an unprecedented level of patients going through clinical trials. As far as I can see, at the peak in 2026, they should have more than 100,000 people in clinical trials. They are trialing every indication they can justify. They're trialing combinations of drugs within their portfolio. They're trialing different dosing regimes, titration methods. They're doing long-term studies with huge numbers of people. They're really giving every drug they have the best opportunity to hoover up any market share that they can possibly get. They also, of course, have huge manufacturing expertise, both in-house and through their network of CDMOs. I think they will, some companies are saying they can't find CDMO capacity. I think Lilly will have absolutely no problem finding the capacity that they need. And also, they've already had some very good success with their direct-to-consumer, or maybe I should say direct-to-patient sales. They're cutting out the middleman, at least in the US, and I think that's a huge advantage to them. And I think it will not be so easy for a lot of the smaller players to do the same thing. So I think unless there's a big change in the market, unless something goes very wrong for Lilly, Lilly should remain on top, and I think they could keep that position for a long time to come. Back over in Europe, I think Novo has a lot to answer for. If there's anyone here from Novo, I'm very sorry for the things I'm saying. Mainly, Novo lost the first mover advantage. They could be right now in the same position Lilly was in if they hadn't been so conservative. They really underestimated the demand for Ozempic and Wegovy, and arguably they're now overestimating demand, and more recently they've started to cut back their forecasts for Ozempic sales. Their next big drug, CagriSema, I think is already dead in the water. It's not competitive with tirzepatide, let alone retatrutide. I think they'll still bring it to market, but I don't know why any patient who has the choice between CagriSema and tirzepatide would choose CagriSema. And maybe more concerningly, the patent cliff for semaglutide is very, very close. Semaglutide was invented a long time ago. I think most people didn't know about this till 2021 or 2022, but the patent is almost out. In 2026, the key countries are India, Canada, Brazil, and China. Those 4 countries alone represent a third of obese patients in the world. There's many other smaller countries in 2026. At least for Novo, they have a few more years of exclusivity in the US and the EU, but this is a bad start for them coming very soon. I think in countries where generic versions come to market, the price is going to fall 80 to 95%. Novo will be completely out of those markets. I think there's a few points maybe we can give Novo some credit for. Their next drugs, amycretin and UBT, are potentially competitive, albeit much further behind in the development timeline than anything Lilly has. Also, while it's very easy to shit-talk Novo right now, it is still true that Ozempic and Wegovy are huge cash cows for them. They are still making billions of dollars every quarter. Probably they have at least a couple more years of making billions every quarter from these 2 drugs. And they have a new CEO. And if that CEO wants to be more aggressive than the previous CEO, he could go out and use that cash to buy up some of the most interesting assets that are out there right now. For example, like I mentioned, Kylera and Viking. If they want to spend a few $1 billion, they could probably acquire a couple of these drugs, which would quickly put them back in competition with Lilly. But so far, it seems like no moves like that are coming. But hopefully their new CEO is much more aggressive. Now, the outlook for the next 5 years, which might be foolish to even attempt to project, but basically what we're going to see from Lilly is a new drug coming to market every year for the next 4 years. 2026, orforglipron, then later retatrutide, then bimagrumab, then eloralintide. The most notable thing, apart from Lilly, that's coming in the next couple of years is generic semaglutide in the other markets outside of US and Europe. Potentially in 2028, Amgen's Maritide could come to market. I think we have a few people from Amgen here. No offense, but I don't think Maritide is that impressive. I don't think it will take much market share from Lilly. And it's really not until 2029 that we could see a lot of the more impressive molecules that I mentioned already coming to market. The problem for all these companies like Novo with amycretin, Kylera, Metsera, Roche, Viking, they're coming into a market that is already saturated by Lilly's very broad portfolio of drugs. And they're probably coming to market just a few months or maybe 1 year before semaglutide goes generic in the US and Europe. So they're, in my opinion, going to have a very hard time competing against Lilly at the higher price range and then generic semaglutide at the cheaper end. So I think a few years from now, CEOs thinking about bringing their drug to market have to ask a few questions. Is my drug significantly more effective for weight loss than tirzepatide or retatrutide? If the answer is no, then probably you shouldn't be bringing your drug to market, unless you can say yes to the second question, which is, aside from weight loss, do I have some key differentiating factor? If the answer to that is also no, then for sure you shouldn't be coming to market, unless you want to get into a massive price war with Lilly. But with generic semaglutide coming behind you, that's just not possible, I think. So I think really the key takeaway from this presentation, if you want to take anything away, is that Lilly are very well positioned for the next 4 or 5 years. Unless there's some major shakeup, they should be on top of the market at least for another 5 years. And anyone else considering to get into this market should really think twice. I think over the past 18 months, we've seen every company you can think of announcing we're getting into GLP-1, just to get the stock price to go up or whatever. I think over the next 18 months, we'll see a lot of CEOs quietly backing out of the obesity space when they start to realize that their drug is just not competitive. And even if it is as good as something Lilly have, is it still worth bringing to market and competing with Lilly, who are 4 years ahead of you and have brand name recognition, et cetera? I think that people have to think carefully about whether it's worth getting into the market then. So yeah, I think Lilly stays on top. The companies I've listed in the middle here have some chance of coming to market, either through differentiation or sheer weight loss that's better than retatrutide. Probably a few of these companies get acquired by either Novo or Lilly. And then at the bottom, I think the obesity graveyard is going to fill up very quickly, as I just mentioned. The vast majority of the 150 or 200 molecules that are being studied now just can't come to market. It's not economically possible. And most of them will end up being abandoned, even though most of the drugs that are being studied now are actually much better than semaglutide. But the bar has just been raised so high now that the game has completely changed. Yeah, before I finish, the contractually obliged promotion of Sinopep, we are a Chinese-based CDMO for peptides and oligos. We also manufacture generic APIs, in particular semaglutide and tirzepatide. Next year should be pretty busy for us as semaglutide goes generic. If anyone has any need for API or CDMO, feel free to get in touch with me. Otherwise, thanks for listening. I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent presentation. Just a few questions around Rybelsus. I didn't see that there. I know it's only for type 2 diabetes. Novo has clinical trials, 25 and 50 milligrams. How do you see that playing into the mix? Oral semaglutide?
Yeah, I think the oral semaglutide, it seems to be not bad. But I don't think it's much better than Lilly's orforglipron. I'm not sure how that's going to play out exactly. And I think it's still a little bit away from coming to market. There are a few other oral drugs that I didn't mention that are actually much better than orforglipron, but a little bit further behind. Maybe orforglipron and Rybelsus can share some market share for a while, but probably in a few years' time, there'll be significantly better drugs in the oral field coming to market. For example, Viking's 2735, the oral version. That looks pretty impressive. So maybe for a couple of years, Rybelsus can take some market share along with orforglipron, but after that, I think it gets more competitive.
I think, as you mentioned before, like the market share for example, for people that are neophobic is around 15, 20%.
Yeah, it's not much.
Yeah, so it's not much. And then out of that 15, 20%, you're going to have 3, 4 players, so it's really not huge of a market.
Yeah.
With semaglutide going on patent, obviously, the liquid version, right? Then hopefully there'll be a conversion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the market for non-needle users is not that big. Yeah.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much for your awesome presentation.
Sure.
So my question for you is, of course, you say the crown was taken by Eli Lilly for obesity, and right now a lot of GLP-1 companies, they are trying to pivot from different indications. You also mentioned that. Do you think our company can compete with Eli Lilly or Novo for other indications on top of obesity?
That's a good question. From what I've seen so far, I think that will also be very difficult for other companies. I think Lilly probably are leading the pack in terms of non-obesity indications. Like I said, they're putting people through clinical trials for anything they can justify. Alzheimer's, knee arthritis, kidney disease, just literally everything. Sleep apnea has also already been approved. It's crazy what they're coming up with, but so far it seems to be going well for them. I think no one is competing in terms of the breadth of other indications that Lilly are coming up with.
May I have a second?
Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned the pricing, and then I think you also mentioned a very important thing is the generic competition. But you also mentioned this is a channel. So when for those small companies, they definitely need to leverage the CDMO, right, when the cost of goods is higher. And can you comment a little bit more about the business channel? Because they are well established, they can have the business channel to sell their product. For those small companies, they don't have this advantage. How you look at this?
So I didn't hear, what was the advantage?
Business channel. So when
Okay.
you sell your drug product to the end user.
Yeah, I see what you mean for the smaller companies.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another thing I think will be a huge challenge for most of the companies who are trying to get into this space. Lilly and also Novo, they have huge brand name recognition, and they have direct-to-patient sales. I think a lot of small companies will struggle to do that. I'm not so sure how that works with the PBMs and everything in the US, but I assume that will be not so easy for the smaller companies, if they can even get to market.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't think they've officially announced, but it's expected to come to market next year. Yeah.
Because I think they've had some good clinical data and they're waiting for the fight.
Yes.
Now, if that is launched next year, how would that impact the injectable market?
Like we were saying already, I don't think it will have a huge impact. I think it's just not that effective of a drug. I think you would only take orforglipron instead of tirzepatide if you really didn't want to use a needle. And those patients aren't taking a GLP-1 anyway. So I think orforglipron just opens up a new market rather than taking away market share from the injectable.
So they're talking 12% weight loss there, I guess.
Yeah, it's about 11 or 12% over 72 weeks. So actually much less than semaglutide. So you've got to be patient.
Right, so it won't impact that.
I think, yeah, it won't impact that much.
I think nice presentation. My question is on the genetic side of it, while everybody predicts the doom today for the semaglutide next year. If you look at the history in Europe, liraglutide went off patent. There were 4 people who launched it. The price erosion has not been more than 25 to 28%. And the same thing is going to happen because you look at China or India or any other market. Do you think that there's going to be a difference? Because the price war has not affected in Europe. Even today, after almost 8 months of loss of patent, the price is just 28% less than what Novo is selling. And in China, for example, I'm sure you read the Financial Times report, which says that only 2 people have been approved by the CDE for accepting the EMFs at all, the drug master fund. So is that going to make a difference? Because if there are only 2 players or 3 players getting approval, the price erosion will not be there. And China has very clearly said only 3 applicants are there, apart from Novo and then 2 other people. So how do you think it's going to happen that part next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. For anyone who didn't hear, his question was how much will the price of the generic drug really fall, especially in China, considering there's not that many approved applicants right now. Yeah. I think in China, yeah, you're right. There are not that many applications accepted right now, but there are many more that I think should be accepted at least over the next year. Maybe a few of them are rejected, of course, yeah. But maybe initially there won't be that much competition. I think at least 6 months into the generic market becoming open, there will be many more players. The liraglutide example, I'm not really sure why that is, but at least in China, I think the price will fall at least 80%, something like that. That's the way we see it, but yeah, who knows? Yeah.
So I had a different opinion because.
I wonder if pharmaceutical company can see the potential cannibalizing effect of selling only GLP-1 and
Mm. Yeah, I think a lot of people have. So his question was, how will the GLP-1 sales affect the sales of other drugs? I guess this comes back to the idea that as people get healthier, they might not need other drugs from other parts of the pharmaceutical world, which of course the pharma industry is not happy about. Yeah, I don't know what the impact will be. I think it's too early to tell. At least companies like Lilly shouldn't have anything to worry about. It's the competitors who have something to worry about. I don't know how that. I don't know how that will change things. Yeah.
So that's a different way of looking at competition.
Yes.
Competing across the board.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, if you're making that argument, you could also argue that Lilly don't want to make people too healthy as well. Then eventually they stop taking. If they lose all of their weight, then they stop taking their drug, then their market is also gone. If you want to take that viewpoint, so I don't know. Yeah. If there are no more questions.
One last question on the disruptor that you mentioned, because it's happened even in the opioid sector, because you have these narcotic raw material being manufactured for fermentation, which they say is going to be the biggest disruptor. So do you think spirulina is going to, as you rightly said, could be a disruptor? But if that goes through, do you think there could be other products coming in from the nutraceutical space that probably targets the weight loss?
Yeah, so his question was about the spirulina, the algae that I mentioned. How much will that disrupt the industry, and will there be other disruptors in the nutraceutical space, if you want to call it that? Yeah, I think there are actually many other companies working on so-called nutraceuticals or potential OTC drugs, mainly by taking existing OTC drugs and combining them together to try and achieve some sort of reasonable weight loss. I think there are a couple companies trying to get to like the 10% weight loss mark using combinations of OTC drugs. That's their strategy to disrupt the peptide industry, have something very cheap with already approved molecules in combination. So yeah, but it remains to be seen if that's a reasonable strategy. I don't know.
Can you comment on these drugs and their effect potentially on the microbiome? Not aware of that study.
Yeah, on the microbiome, I'm also not aware. I don't know, but that's an interesting question. There must be someone looking into that, but I'm not aware of any data. Okay, then I will finish there. Thank you.